At the book talk, you had an interesting assessment of Warren and Sanders, and how you've sort of come around a little bit on Sanders, and people should understand that Elizabeth Warren, for people our generation, I'm older than you, but our generation in terms of like sort of like engagement in politics, at least professionally, Elizabeth Warren came out of nowhere and deftly not only like fought off Republicans, but also fought off Democrats as well, who were hesitant to allow her to have so much authority, which in many respects she sort of just like finagled in creating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Just give me your sense of how your assessment of both those candidates and senators has evolved.
Yeah, and the irony is that the centrist Twitter crowd calls me a Bernie bro relentlessly, which is ironic given what you said, in that our generation, we watched, we wanted someone to be, to have that fighting spirit and to recognize that one of the problems with Democrats is that they weren't fighting hard enough for what they believed in, and so she comes in and, her famous quote to the Huffington Post about the CFPB, she was like, asked about, compromising a particular element of it. And she said, my first choice is a strong, independent CFPB. And my second choice is for the Senate floor to be covered in blood and teeth. And that was her attitude. That was her approach. And this was, she's talking on the record here. This is not her aide giving a background quote. And every time that they would try to weaken the CFPB, she would push back, and there'd be public outrage over it, and they would back off the attempts to neuter it. And the fact that it got through at all is remarkable. The fact that it got through with a single, independent director and funding that can't be cut off by Congress is truly remarkable. And so we saw her doing that sort of thing, going after Tim Geithner in public, calling out, Democrats and Republicans, and at the same time didn't see Sanders involved in the like post 2009 Obama era fights. He ironically, the thing he got pounded the most for in the 2016 primary is one time suggesting that somebody should primary Obama. Out of frustration over Obama's kind of deficit hawkishness,
right,
in the 2011 period. But that was, it wasn't like he was an Elizabeth Warren who was constantly pushing him. So he got the worst of all worlds. Like he wasn't really in it, but then he also got punished badly for it in the primary because Obama remained so popular. To Bernie's credit, he got some significant money for community health centers in the Affordable Care Act. He got an audit the Fed bill through with Ron Paul. But beyond that, he was kind of like a non-factor. And he didn't use his position either to leverage media attention to progressive fights. He didn't organize progressives in the Senate to form a bloc to try to leverage. Like one of the most important fights during that time was blocking Larry Summers from being Fed chair.
Yep.
Like God knows what calamity the world was saved from by Jeff Merkley and Elizabeth Warren, organizing progressive resistance to him and forcing Obama to drop him. And so for people like me, we watched Elizabeth Warren doing all this, and then we see Sanders' presidential campaign taking off. And we're like, where is this coming from? And so it did take me a while to recognize that, kind of in spite of what Sanders had done before, and also partly because of his consistency in what he'd been saying for so long, the disengagement that I didn't like was a disengagement that also gave him an authenticity because he wasn't part of the system. And so it took me a while to come around to the idea that a real movement had formed around him. and that he himself was beginning to recognize that, and that he stopped seeing himself as a gadfly and saw himself more as an actual political actor who was now on the world stage and had a chance to actually succeed in making some transformative change. And so I think it's been hard for a lot of people of my generation to make that turn and to see the new Sanders compared to the old one.
Right. I mean, it really, in many respects, was like that, where he realized in, January of 2016, like, oh my gosh, I did,
right.
He entered in as doing an issue campaign. My understanding is he got in when he got in because he wanted to make sure that Warren wasn't going to run. And
right. He really pushed her hard to run, and she didn't do it.
She didn't do it in that cycle,
right.
And so he jumped in to talk about wealth inequality, and then realized that this really could resonate.
Yeah, and it also helps explain why Warren ultimately didn't endorse him, because she, like Sanders, they both thought that he was in there to raise the issues. He was in there to raise the issues, and so if you're in there to raise the issues.
They both thought that he was there exclusively to raise the issues, not to win.
Right.
And she wanted to be able to maintain, the power there. Right.
Because her whole game was that, and she talked to Hillary twice privately about this, saying I'm going to go to war with you over your personnel choices. Like if you try to stack your cabinet with Wall Street types, then I'm going to do everything I can, in the Senate to block them. But I also want to be constructive, and I'll give you names of people who I think would be good regulators. And so, we can do this one of two ways. And so she was trying to keep some channel open between her and Hillary. I think in hindsight, Hillary should have told her, go ahead, endorse Bernie, because then when she ultimately beat Bernie, to have Warren on stage endorsing her after having endorsing Bernie, would have had more credibility to it.
Well, we could draw up a long list of woulda, shouldas when it comes to Clinton's campaign. I think, frankly, taking Warren as her running mate would have been a smart move. And my understanding is that Warren was interested in that as well. But Ryan Grim, it's fascinating. There's so much to be learned, and the thing that I love about this is that, and I would imagine even to some extent it would have even more value to listeners, is to be able to compare what I perceived was happening during throughout this era, as recently as months ago almost, versus what deep reporting tells me was happening is very important, so that people can have a really clear-eyed assessment of what's going on and what are the forces here. This stuff is it's really fascinating, and the reporting is impeccable, and I appreciate you coming on and telling us about it.
Oh, that's nice of you to say. Thank you.
All right.